Ladies and gentlemen, it is official. The Suzuki SV650 just does not want to die. Like a recently reawakened zombie, it is offering its heart up from the grave to breathe life into another new model that we will probably be talking about for millennia. It is, of course, the SV7-GX. I'm out here in France, we've just tested it, and I'm here to tell you all about it. So as ever, I'm going to go through the specs, the features, the pricing, the colours, everything else, and then I'm going to tell you how it has handled out here on the roads around Montpellier. It is starting at £6,999. It goes up to £7,399. So there's a white bike, which is arriving in the UK later. That's going to be the base model. You got the blue bike that you can see in front of me. There is a grey bike. I think they actually call it greige. It's like a grey beige. And there is also a black bike. The black bike actually is probably my pick of the bunch because I think it looks absolutely sweet and stealthy in that metallic black colour scheme. This engine is probably one of the most familiar V-twin engines on the planet. They've made about 500,000 of them since 1999 in the SV650 trim. Of course, a 645cc V-twin, it puts out 72.4 bhp in GX trim. You've got 64 Newton meters of torque, and you've got revised intake, internals. There's been a little bit of fettling going on inside and around the engine there. Suspension, we've got 41mm telescopic forks, non-adjustable. They are not the same forks as found on the old SV. They've got a little bit more travel, same with the rear end. The shock has been completely reworked and retweaked for this, specifically for this sporty tourer come commuter bike chassis. We've got Tokiko calipers at the front. We've got a single sliding caliper at the back. The front calipers are 290mm, I think, and the rear is a 240. And we've got ABS, which is just a standard basic 2-channel system. So there's no IMU control, no traction control with cornering effect, and no ABS with cornering effect whatsoever. This thing tips the scales at 211 kilograms, and that is wet weight ready to ride. The seat height is 795mm, which does make this one of the most low seat height accessible bikes in the segment as it stands at the moment. And you've got 17.4 litre tank capacity, which Suzuki claim, if you do the WMTC method of calculating the economy, it's about 64 or 65 miles to the gallon. That will get you about 250 odd miles, which is pretty good going from a sub 20 litre fuel tank. So I've told you about the bike, now it's time to tell you how it's ridden. We've been out here in Montpellier, it's been absolutely scorching. The temperature's got to be up around 35, 36 degrees, I would say. We got on this morning, and my first impression of sitting on this thing was it feels absolutely tiddly. I cannot flat foot on many bikes, if I'm being completely honest. I'm 5'7" tall. On this thing, I am flat footed on the floor. The upper body ergonomics are quite roomy, but the pegs feel quite high. So they're the same position they were on the SV, but the seat height from the SV compared to the SV has only gone up by about 10mm. So the lower body ergonomics are still quite sporty. A quick thumb of the starter button, and that unmistakable V-twin fires into life, and it is one of the most recognizable motors on the planet. It's got that lovely, friendly, easygoing nature, and all of the good points about the SV and all the points that made the SV such a successful bike and such a popular bike with certain riders and with newer riders and with riding schools are all still there. You've got the super light clutch, the throttle connection on this, which is ride by wire now on the GX, is all very, very good. The gearbox is not the slickest, most direct, most accurate, but it works. You didn't get any false neutrals or anything like that. And before we got to the good roads, we had about 10 to 15 miles of sort of town and city riding to get out the way. And that left me with my first impression of this bike, because we were doing some quite tight turns and there was the occasional U-turn that we had to throw in for good measure. And it's just so super easy to ride this thing. You don't have to think about anything. Those little tight U-turns, you can do them on a sixpence. Absolutely brilliant. The engine's got enough punch that when you need to sort of get into a gap between two cars to get yourself some space, you can do so. It's just a very easy, very naturally handling bike to ride around town. The suspension is quite soft. I'm going to say it's very soft, but what that did around the town, where there was a lot of bumps and speed bumps and potholes and stuff, it soaked all of that stuff up. The only thing that I did have in the back of my mind was whether or not we get out on the fast stuff, whether that's going to be a little bit of a compromise when you start to push on, but I'm going to come on to that. Luckily enough, we didn't have long to wait before we got to the good roads. While the suspension, I'll stick with that theme, doesn't feel like the most premium setup out there, it does a decent enough job to allow you to push on. It does pitch on the brakes and it does squat under acceleration, and sometimes if you're in a really fast corner and you start to get on the gas after the apex, you will feel the front start to go light and it will start to try and wander. I didn't adjust the rear preload on this. We did have an opportunity to dial a little bit more in at lunchtime, but I didn't take the opportunity to do that. Had I done that, it might have been a little bit less understeery. Really, from a handling perspective, when I'm talking about the suspension and the chassis, the only other thing that can throw a little bit of a curveball is if you hit mid-corner bumps, and it will start to throw some shapes. It's kind of a bit of flex in the frame and the suspension's kind of jumping around a little bit. It's not too bad because it's really only up at the very limit of where you would want to take the bike in really quite fast corners. A lot of people probably won't ride like that. This is I see it as a commuter, a bit of a lightweight short distance commuter and tourer, and in that respect the handling is okay. The Takiko calipers are nowhere near the most premium calipers that you will find in this segment or in any other, but they do a decent enough job. The braking power, I would describe it best as adequate. The brake feel is okay. It's more than up to the task of stopping this just over 200 kilogram bike. And you know, there might be something you could do with some slightly better pad compounds that you could slip in to try and improve the braking power a little bit, or maybe even some braided hoses. But overall, for 90% of the riders out there, I don't think you're gonna have too much problem with the braking system or the chassis or any of the other components for that matter. I just need to talk very quickly about the ABS system, because as mentioned, it's only 2-channel, there's no IMU. Normally that can mean that the ABS can be very intrusive, but actually today on this, I don't think it has been. Barely felt it intruding at the rear wheel, and I never felt it once when I was on the brakes at the front wheel. I've got to say that this bike is shod with some really, really nice tyres. So this has got Pirelli Angel GT tyres on it, as OEM from the factory. And these have performed faultlessly. Fair enough, we're riding in absolutely perfect conditions. The road surface has been choppy, but generally quite grippy, perfectly dry, nice and warm, and they have performed very, very well. So it'll be interesting to see when we get them back in the UK, or what they are like on Britain's slightly sketchier and slightly cooler roads. I can't talk about a bike like this without talking about the comfort, so I'm going to go into that next. And I started off the day riding the totally bone stock bike. So I had the screen in the stock position, and I had the seat, which was the basic sort of stock seat. At lunch, we asked the Suzuki engineers if they could change a few things, and one thing they did for me was they put the screen on a slightly taller setting. So you notice the screen, it is adjustable, but you need a screwdriver to do it, and a little bit of time at the side of the road. You've got basically 3 positions that you can set it in, and there's 50mm of adjustment between the tallest and the lowest adjustment. There is also an optional screen that you can add on, which I will come onto later. On stock settings, on the middle setting of the screen, I found it too low. My head was in a bit of turbulent there. It wasn't getting buffeted around, but it was just noisy. So took it up onto the taller setting to see if that would alleviate that. It didn't quite. I still think that for me, I'm only 5'7", but for me riding this, I would want the slightly taller screen. Again, I think it adds another 50mm onto the top of this one. I didn't have to stoop so far to get into the bubble, but there's still definitely quite a lot of like that rumbly, light turbulence around my helmet as we were riding along on the motorway. The seat is actually a little bit of an improvement over the standard seat, really for 2 reasons. Yes, it is a bit more plush. Yes, it's a bit softer. It's a bit more accommodating. But the main thing is it's got that extra 25mm in the foam. So your seat to peg distance has just been increased ever so slightly. And that was noticeable this afternoon when I was riding it. If you are taller than me, you are going to want to go for the accessory comfort seat just to get that little bit of extra padding in there. If you're any taller than that, you're going to need to look at some kind of aftermarket option, because from where these pegs to this seat is, for me, if you're that tall, you're going to be having some sort of pains and cramps in your knees if you are going to be riding for long distances. While I'm talking about the comfort, quick note on vibrations really. So none to note through the handlebars, none to note through the tank either. And the seat is obviously, because it's so nicely damped and so nicely padded, there aren't any vibes coming through there. The only place that I did get them was through the pegs a little bit, and they aren't rubber damped pegs. And I think maybe some rubber damped pegs would be probably a little bit of an improvement and just help out the vibrations into my lower legs. So, do I have any niggles about the SV7-GX? I think having a screen that is only adjustable with tools and a little bit of time at the side of the road is a bit of a pain in the backside, because quite often you do want to be able to flick the screen up when you're on the motorway, and then when you get to a twisty section, you want to get your head down, you will want to flick the screen down again. I do think that is a little bit of a pain. I think that is something that Suzuki have done because it would have just added a little bit more to the price. It would have probably taken the bike out of the price point that they were aiming at with it. So it is what it is. My biggest gripe with this bike though is it hasn't got cruise control. And Suzuki, in the presentation last night at the hotel, they took us through the new throttle body design that they've spent a lot of time designing, and now they've got 2 throttle bodies that have got independent actuators on each throttle body, not an actuator in the middle opening 2 manually operated throttle bodies. And they went to all that trouble and they went to all of that effort and that money designing all of that, and they didn't put a cruise control button on it, which I think is really, really criminal, because that is something that is really getting quite common in this class. All the other competitors have got it, and I'm talking mainly about Tiger Sport 660 and the Tracer 7. So not having it on this, I think, is a little bit of an own goal. So I'm going to go through the verdict quickly. This was never going to be the bike that sets the motorcycle world on fire in 26. It's not that kind of bike. Suzuki have taken probably one of the most tried and tested naked V-twin platforms, and they have turned it into a modern, stylish sports tourer come commuter bike that a lot of people will get a lot of use out of because it ticks a lot of boxes for them. As it sits as a tiny little commuter and sports tourer, it does perfectly well. It does a lot of things well, but it doesn't do any one particular thing earth-shatteringly brilliantly. Apart from the fact that it is supremely accessible and very, very easy to ride, everything else that it does, you can just say is okay. And like I said, of all the bikes in this little segment, we're looking at things like the Tracer 7 and the Tiger Sport 660. This is by far the most accommodating and the most easy to ride of either of them. And it is also the most approachable because it's got that soft, friendly, easygoing delivery from that 650 engine down there. But there is a trade-off to that, and I'm going to focus on the 2 main protagonists in the sector, which is the Tracer 7 and the Tiger Sport 660. So this bike is not a tech fest like the Tracer 7, and it's not as aspirational. It doesn't look as pretty and as modern as the Tracer 7, and it's not as dynamically able as the Tiger Sport 660. It hasn't got that sporty riding dynamic. It hasn't got that sporty triple inline 3-cylinder exhaust note that just makes it so evocative. But it is a fair few quid cheaper. But in today's world, is that really enough to make you want to go out and buy this over the other options that are out there for a couple of £1,000 more? You can let me know in the comments. And while you're there, if you like the video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of Visordown's latest videos. And for all the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to visordown.com.